guys ever? This is a super interesting story. Okay, let's jump into this. Okay, U.S. soldiers accused of smuggling and distributing synthetic flour in South Korea. The arrests came after unprecedented search and seizure operations on at least two U.S. military bases. A detective told NBC News. Now, what are one of the who is the biggest arms dealer in the world? That is the U.S. government. That's Uncle Sam, right? Who is the biggest? I mean, allegedly, who is probably one of the biggest? Just pretty much overall, who is one of the biggest dealers of illicit things? The U.S. government, whether it's directly through them, or if it's utilizing them in more obscure ways. If you think about it, right, the Vietnam War, when all the troops were coming back, one of the big reasons why we had an explosion in the heroin the heroin, the opioid epidemic, the heroin epidemic, right? The opioid epidemic is kind of it's pharmaceuticals, but right, the Thai, the weed, right, the Thai heroin, that all came back from soldiers coming back home. And so a big smuggling, a lot of shit gets smuggled through the army, right, through us, because we have military bases pretty much everywhere. We've got we got about 1,000, we got like, I think, 1,100 military bases all over the world. And we've got ships, planes coming from all over. And so feels like potentially there's some people within the government that might, be able to use this. Now, let's go into this though. This is super fascinating. I want to cover this real quick. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below in the chat. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. So this is by Stella Kim and Chantel De Silver out of NBCnews.com. So sold to South Korea. So police in South Korea have accused 17 American soldiers of smuggling and distributing synthetic marijuana, which they say was brought into the country through the U.S. military's postal service. Man, the U.S. That's crazy. So 4 South Korean nationals and Filipino nationals were also taken into custody. Cha Ming-suk and a detective in Pyeongtaek, a city south of the capital of Seoul, told NBC News in a telephone interview. So the Shah said the arrest came after unprecedented search and seizure operations on at least 2 U.S. military bases, including Camp Humphreys and the hub of U.S. Forces Korea and the U.S. Army's most active airfield in the Pacific, according to its website. So let's go. Okay, so synthetic flower is an umbrella term used to describe drugs that mimic the effects of THC, the main psychoactive ingredients of this plant, according to the U.S. Enforcement Administration. So people convicted of importing marijuana into South Korea can face prison sentences of 5 years to life, while those caught by buying and selling it can face a minimum of 1 year behind bars, the New York Times reported. Those caught using it can be sentenced to up to 5 years in prison or fined up to $37,000, the newspaper said. Okay. Interesting. Okay, one of the things that usually happens with the synthetic, right? So like if you go to prison, right, God forbid you guys go to prison, but anybody that's in the chat that's been to prison, what happens with prison is that because, let's say, you're getting drug tested, right? Now, I don't know if this is necessarily the reason why this is. It might. I think it's probably plays a big part in it, actually, but who knows? I can't confirm that. But if you're getting drug tested in jail, right? You need something, people want to get, they want to get high. So they smoke like K2 spice, right? Because that doesn't show up on the drug test. And this thing about K2 spice and all these different synthetic, cannabinoids, right? These things are literally, so funny enough, let me start here. Funny enough, you guys want to know where the original kind of K2 spice kind of came from? It literally came from a scientist working for Pfizer. Funny enough, right? It was a German scientist working for Pfizer, and he discovered this, right? And it happened to get out of the lab somehow. He wasn't really sure how, but he was, horrified about it because what he described this, these kind of, synthetic marijuana as K2 spice, these different, substances. He's like, it's like you don't really know the actual effect you're going to have depending on, because there's so many different types of him. But he pretty much compared it to like you're almost on the same level of like doing actual Russian roulette. And there's stories, I'm sure, if anybody's in the chat that's had, smoked any, synthetic products, marijuana, they potentially have had some really crazy meltdowns or crazy, situations happen because it makes you go wild. Like, there's all different types of stories, all different types of effects, and it's definitely interesting. Now, I think this is what they're referring to when they talk about synthetic marijuana, right? I think potentially because there might be drug testing there, they use this. But yeah, because see, they try to mimic the effects of THC, the main psycho. So it's not THC. I see people in the chat saying that. It's definitely that. Now, like I said, I lived in Japan for a few months. I used to be really good at Japanese. I used to be almost pretty much fluent. Japan, South Korea, a lot of these different Asian countries are extremely, still to this day, some of them, obviously Thailand's different, very, very against cannabis, very against cannabis. And we're America's a big reason why, because we kind of forced everyone to follow our laws and anyway, there's a whole history of that. But in general, if you can get, products, you can get some flour. I mean, just for anybody in the chat that's in Japan or been to Japan recently, like what's the price of a gram there? It's like $90, bro. It's like $100 for a gram. Right? I can't wait to go to Japan, back to Japan soon too. I know that their cannabis culture is starting to really flourish. It's been a while since I've been there, but these kind of markets, right? Whenever there's heavy restrictions on them, they're supply and demand, right? You're going to get a ridiculous amount of money, right? So I'm sure even the synthetic marijuana they're still making good money on, even if it was spice or K2. But for folks that are trying to for all my trappers out there, if you want to go find some markets that are still popping off, getting like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 pounds, $6,000 pounds, go find isolated islands or island countries or countries where they're like there's not a lot of product on, obviously, because supply and demand, right? There's certain islands in the world that things are more pricey, right, in general, and that includes product. So if you want to go get a ridiculous amount for your, it's just how do you get it there, or how do you grow it there? That's really the thing. Anyway, it's interesting with this, guys. This is definitely interesting. We'll keep an eye on this. But wow, South Korea, U.S. soldiers smuggling, distributing synthetic marijuana.